हरे कृष्णा। नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। श्री चैतन्य मनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप गदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। Hare Krishna. So we welcome you all back to the second day of our discussion on the overview of the Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti section of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So this course we have titled Rediscovering Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, because we will be, even though it's an overview course, we will be emphasizing or dwelling more on the essential concepts that Srila Rupa Goswami is trying to explain in the section on Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. So as I promised yesterday, I would start today's discussion by answering the questions that were asked based on yesterday's discussion. There were not many questions, hardly one or two questions. Actually only one question for that matter. The question was, why is Srila Rupa Goswami defining in the definition of pure devotional service, why has he mentioned the secondary characteristics first and the primary characteristics next? Why Anyabhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karmadya Navritam first, both of which are secondary characteristics, and why Anukulyena Krishnana Shilanam, both of which are primary characteristics, why he has presented it second. So honestly speaking, I do not know. Because I checked through other definitions of pure devotional service as mentioned in Bhagavad Gita and other such literatures. It's given in a jumbled way. It does not follow the protocol that Srila Rupa Goswami has followed. So since neither Srila Jiva Goswami or Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur or Srila Prabhupada comment on this subject matter, the honest reason actually I do not know. So if I ever in future get to know why he mentions the secondary characteristics first and primary characteristics next, I will definitely share it with everyone. So that was only one serious question that came up in the chat box, which was a little disappointing, but still okay, because it was just, most of what we covered was introduction. I will do a quick overview of what we have seen till now in yesterday's discussion. We started by glorifying Srila Rupa Goswami as the one who perfectly understood the mood and mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and actually established this mood and mission on planet Earth. And we saw Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's glorification of Srila Rupa Goswami as being the one personality because of whom even common devotees are able to understand this concept of rasa. And we also saw the instance where Srila Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is personally instructing Srila Rupa Goswami to share this message of Bhakti Rasa with everyone. And then we tried to understand what is this book Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and why is it a very important book. We saw this book is very important because it mainly focuses on the definitions and the essential concepts which occur and reoccur again and again in pure devotional literatures like Srimad Bhagavatam. It has encapsulated all that and presented in one book. So the essential philosophical concepts along with the essential definitions which Gaudiya Vaishnavas used in their discussion of philosophy is actually presented in a very clear way in this book Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Therefore, it is a very important book. And then we saw also what is this nectar of devotion that Prabhupada wrote. We tried to understand that how it is a summary study of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, just as Krishna book is a summary study of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And we saw that many more people have taken up to practice of, taken up to studying Rupa Goswami's teachings through Prabhupada's NOD than even through Rupa Goswami's original Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Because Prabhupada has written the book in such a way that it would be very much relevant to his new audience in a way that new audience can appreciate. So that's the reason why NOD is very important. And then we started the discussion on the first wave. The first wave as we saw the eastern section, first wave talks about Samanya Bhakti, which is what we are currently discussing. Samanya Bhakti means an overview of Bhakti, and this starts with Mangalacharan. Mangalacharan means invoking auspiciousness. So in this we saw three aspects of Mangalacharan: Vastu Nirdesh, Ashirvada and Namaskar. And in Vastu Nirdesh we understood that the subject matter of the book Rupa Goswami presents is Akila Rasamrita Murti Krishna. Krishna, the personification of all devotional rasas. And then we saw Ashirvada. In Ashirvada, then we saw Namaskar. Namaskar has three components: Guru, Vaishnava, Bhagavan, Tinera Smaran. A favorable, grateful remembrance of Guru, Vaishnava and Bhagavan. And Rupa Goswami very favorably remembered his own brother Sanatan Goswami, whom he accepted as his Guru. And he favorably remembered the Vaishnavas by comparing them to Makaras. And then he favorably remembered Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whom he mentions that even though I am a wicked person, it is because of the inspiration given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that I am endeavoring to compile such a wonderful literature like that. So in this way, we saw Mangalacharan, and after Mangalacharan, we discussed Ashirvada. So Ashirvada is the benediction given by the author to the readers, and the benediction that Srila Rupa Goswami gives to his readers is that whoever takes shelter of this Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu shall never leave the path of bhakti for lack of philosophical conviction. So if one leaves bhakti because of lack of philosophical conviction, it is guaranteed that he has not understood Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu properly. Because this is Rupa Goswami's blessings. Srila Rupa Goswami's blessings can never go wrong. So if one leaves bhakti because of lack of philosophical conviction, the only reason or one of the most important reasons could be probably he has not taken shelter of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and understood the concepts that Srila Rupa Goswami explains in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu properly. Then the next theme that we discussed was Grantha Vibhag, how this book was divided by Rupa Goswami. We saw that he divided this book into 4 parts: Eastern, Southern, Western and Northern. And Eastern section is what is within our scope. In fact, Eastern section first 2 waves only, which discuss about Samanya Bhakti and Sadhana Bhakti. And then subsequently Bhava Bhakti and Prema Bhakti would be separate courses. And in fact, even within the second wave, only we will be seeing Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, and Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti, which is also within the second wave, will be dealt with in a separate course, which will also include Bhava Bhakti and Prema Bhakti. And then the southern section we saw, it talks about the Samagri Bhavas. Samagri Bhavas means what are the constituents of spiritual rasa. What are the components? We saw 5 components: Sattvika Bhava, Sanchari Bhava, Anubhavas, Vibhava and Sthayi Bhav. And through an example, I tried to explain what are these 5 elements which combine together to give spiritual experience. And then in the western section are the 5 primary rasas, and in the northern section are the 7 secondary rasas along with favorable combination of rasas like Sakya and Hasya or Vatsalya and Karuna, and some rasas which do not mix very compatibly. So this is the subject matter of whole Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. This is how Srila Rupa Goswami has divided this book. Then after discussing about the Grantha Vibhag, we discussed the definition of Uttama Bhakti, which is the most pivotal explanation in this whole book given by Srila Rupa Goswami. We saw this famous definition, Anyabhilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karmadhyanavritam, Anukulyena Krishnanashilanam Bhaktiruttama. We saw that Uttama Bhakti or pure devotional service has 4 components, 2 primary and 2 secondary. The 2 primary components are Anukulyena Krishnanushilanam. Anukulyena means done with a very pleasing attitude or done with the intent of pleasing Krishna on the part of the performer. And Krishna Anushilanam means engaging one's mind, body and words in some practical activities for pleasing Krishna. This is Anushilanam. And then we saw the third component was Anya Abhilashita Shunyam. Anya Abhilashita Shunyam means that practice of bhakti should not have any other element, any other desire other than the desire to please Krishna. And Jnana Karmadi Anavritam, that practice of bhakti should not be overly covered by impersonalistic jnana or yoga or karma. So like varnashram, dharma, like that. So in this way we saw and tried to understand the meaning of these 4 elements of pure devotional service or Uttama Bhakti. And this is where we paused yesterday, even though we saw a little bit more elaborately about these 4 elements. As it was advertised about this course, that it is an overview but with emphasis on personal application. How these concepts personally apply to us. So now the first major concept and the most important concept that we have discussed from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is the definition of pure devotional service. Now we are going to do a practical exercise. So the practical exercise is that we are going to evaluate our own practice and see if we are practicing pure devotional service. So that's what we are going to see. Are you practicing pure devotional service? This is the next very important theme. This is not a part of the discussion of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, but this is a personal application part. Very important part. We will try to do it little elaborately. This is a very important exercise. I strongly suggest that while we are going through each slide, you please introspect and try to evaluate your own practice, and it will give some clarity about what we are practicing. Otherwise, this whole definition of pure devotional service will only be theory for us. Anyabhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karmadhyanavritam Anukulyena Krishnanashilanam. Oh, that is pure devotional service. We will see it only as being relevant for writing the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu exam during our Bhakti Shastri. So now we should try and evaluate, are we living our lives according to this definition that Srila Rupa Goswami has given? So generally, when I ask this question, I have taught this course many times over. And this is the first time I am teaching it to the camera, and of course, eventually through the camera it will reach out to many people. But I don't have a practical way of interacting with the audience. But generally, I have a fairly good experience of when this question is put, what most people answer. So I will share that answer with you, but you can introspect it for yourself while I am sharing this answer. So generally, after discussing this definition in detail, I ask the students, I ask the audience, if you evaluate your own practice of devotional service, does it fit in this definition given by Srila Rupa Goswami? Is your bhakti, is your practice of bhakti anyabhilashita shunyam? Is it jnana karmadya navritam? Is it anukulyena krishnana shilanam? So generally, they take a few seconds to introspect, and generally speaking, no one raises their hands. They say that, sorry Prabhu, actually the first criteria itself we fail. The criteria which creates the most trouble is this first criteria of anyabhilashita shunyam. So what they think is, Prabhu, actually we have lot of desires. I am not free of desires. Lust, anger, envy, greed, illusion, pride. All these impel me to act in various ways, exhibiting various different kinds of desires. So therefore, one thing I can say is, it is true that I have a favorable attitude towards Krishna. I do certain activities for pleasing Krishna. It is true that I perform some personal service for the pleasure of Krishna, like chanting, hearing, etc. And I may even donate some Lakshmi for the upkeep of the temple, like that. So Anushilanam is there, Anukulyena is there. Jnana karma dhyanavritam, anyway I don't know much about jnana and karma, so that is not a major issue. But the one big problem is abhilasha. This other material desires haunt me. So for this reason, I feel my practice of bhakti is not Uttama Bhakti. This is the frank admission of most of the devotees whom I have met. Then we have one more choice. If you think you are not practicing pure devotional service because the anyabhilashita shunyam part is not fulfilled, then let's try to evaluate if you are practicing mixed devotional service, Mishra Bhakti, as it is called. So in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, this Mishra Bhakti is described by Kapila Dev in the 29th chapter. So he talks about bhakti in the mode of goodness, bhakti in the mode of passion, and bhakti in the mode of ignorance. So he describes bhakti in the mode of ignorance. He says, Samrambi, that person is angry. Bhinnadrik, he is devoid of compassion. Yaha mai bhavam kuryad, but he worships me. But worships me with what intention? Abhisandaya, with the intention of himsam dambam matsaryam, with the intention of violence, pride and hatred. So generally people say, oh Prabhu, I think this fits my practice of bhakti. I do feel angry, maybe not so violent, but proud, yes, definitely. And hatred, sometimes I do have hatred. So it looks like I practice tamasic bhakti sometimes. I said, just don't jump into that conclusion. Let's talk about rajasic bhakti. So, Srila Kapila Dev mentions, Vishayan abhisandaya yasha aishwaryam evava archadav archayed yomam prutak bhavasa rajasaha. So he says, what is this rajasic bhakti? He says, Yaha mam arched, one who worships me, archa adav, in the form of deities, prutak bhavaha adhisandaya, with abhisandaya, with desire for other objects, like fame, wealth, etc., is rajasic bhakti. So immediately devotees raise their hands now also. Oh, it seems like sometimes I practice Rajasic Bhakti because I do have desire for fame, which is relentless, it never goes away. And wealth, yes, we need wealth. I have desire for wealth. So therefore it seems like sometimes I do Tamasic Bhakti, sometimes I do Rajasic Bhakti. What about this Sattvic Bhakti? Karma nirharam uddishya parasminva tadarpanam yajed yashtavyam itiva pratak bhavasa sattvika. So he says, in this Sattvika Bhakti, one worships the Supreme Lord in the mood of a duty for the purpose of achieving liberation. Liberation means what? Liberation from miseries. So if someone is performing bhakti so that he can overcome miseries, that is bhakti performed in the mode of goodness. So immediately devotees raise their hands for this also. Yes, Prabhu, I do have, when I am overcome with miseries, I do intensely hope that I overcome that misery. So therefore it looks like sometimes I perform Tamasic Bhakti, sometimes Rajasic Bhakti and sometimes Sattvic Bhakti. It looks like a competition. And this is exactly what Krishna also says. Rajasattvam tamaschaiva tamasattvam rajastata. There is a constant competition between the three modes in people who are staying in this material world and conditioned by the three material modes. There is a constant competition. Sometimes Rajogun takes over, sometimes Tamogun takes over, and very rarely sometimes Sattvagun takes over. So most people feel, yes, actually I am doing in fact, the kind of bhakti, if I have to evaluate the kind of bhakti that I perform, it is actually a mixture of Sattvaguni, Rajoguni and Tamoguni Mishra Bhakti. This is what most people come to this conclusion after hearing these definitions. But wait, let me give you a third definition. First definition was Anyabhilashita Shunyam, which most of us felt, no, I don't fall in this category because I do have other desires. The second definition, the second set of three definitions was Sattvaguni, Rajoguni, Tamoguni Bhakti, mixed devotional service, which we felt, yes, this is exactly where we fit. And I will give the next definition, which is the classic definition which is given for Vaidhi Bhakti from Srimad Bhagavatam. This is from the teachings of Lord Krishna to Kapila Dev. Teachings of Lord Krishna to Uddhava. This comes in the 11th canto, a famous discussion which is called as Uddhava Gita. So in Uddhava Gita, Krishna defines who is a Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakta. Who is a Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakta? He says, Jata Shraddho Matkatasu Nirvinna Sarvakarmasu Veda Dukkatmakam Kaman Parityage api Anishwarah Tato Bhajeta Mam Prita Shraddalur Dridhanishchaya Jushamanascha Tan Kaman Dukko Darkamscha Garhayan. A very elaborate description of the psychology of a Vaidhi Sadhaka. So what is this psychology of a Vaidhi Sadhaka? He says, Jata Shraddho Matkatasu. This person has developed some faith in the subject matters connected to me. He likes to hear, he likes to chant, he has developed some faith in the path of bhakti. Nirvinna Sarvakarmasu. Nirvinna Sarvakarmasu means he is convinced that apart from bhakti, I don't have to perform karma, jnana, yoga, etc. to achieve perfection. Krishna Bhakti kaile sarva karma krita hoy. He has that faith. If I perform Krishna Bhakti, I will achieve perfection. That much faith he must have. Jata Shraddho Matkatasu Nirvinna Sarva Karmasu Veda Dukkatmakam Kaman. He knows that if I engage in some sense gratificatory activity, it will lead to suffering. That much faith he has. But Parityage api Anishwarah. But still, when it comes to actually giving up sense gratification, he is not always able to say no. Sometimes he succumbs. When he looks at a rasgulla which is not offered, or when he sees some pani puri or golgappa on the road which is not prasadam, he might salivate uncontrollably. And sometimes if the urge is too strong, he may succumb to it also. But, so this is his state. Veda dukkhatmakam kaman, he knows that if I endeavor for sense gratification, eventually I will suffer. But parityage api anishwara, he is not able to always say no. Sometimes he succumbs to sense gratificatory desires. Then he says, Jushamanascha tan kaman dukkho darkamscha garhayan. And whenever he succumbs to the sense gratificatory desires, he feels very repentant. Oh, I should not have done this. Why did I do this? This will be displeasing to my Guru. This will be displeasing to Krishna. Krishna warns me against this in the Bhagavad Gita. Why did I do it? In that way, he feels repentant. So, this is the psychology of the Vaidhisadhaka explained by Krishna in these two verses. And he says, Tato bhajeta mam prita shraddhalur dridanischaya. My dear devotee, I know you are struggling with your senses. Do not get discouraged. Continue the struggle. Don't, shraddhalur, do not doubt the process. Do not lose faith in the process. Dhrida nischaya. At the same time, try to increase your determination. Next time such a person will plan, okay, under such and such circumstances, I felt trapped to sense gratification. How I can nicely avoid putting myself in such a situation so that I need not succumb to sense gratificatory desires next time. He may decide that, oh, next time I will not take this route to go to this place because there are too many Golgappa walas and I may get distracted. So he will choose an alternate route which may be longer, but nevertheless he is conscious that I should not act in a way which is displeasing to Krishna and Guru. So Krishna is telling, increase your determination to say no to sense gratification and don't doubt the process. Don't think, oh, I have been practicing bhakti for so long. Is this bhakti still working? Maybe it's not working. So don't doubt the process because the process definitely works. Otherwise, Krishna and all the acharyas would never recommend a process that is impotent. It is supremely potent, and that's what our acharyas have always emphasized on. So therefore, we should be very careful not to doubt the process. At the same time, we can work on increasing or enhancing our determination to say no. So to summarize, Krishna indicates these 5 classic symptoms of a Vaidhisadhaka. Jata Shraddho Matkatasu. He has developed faith in the devotional practices. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. He has faith in these 9 limbs. And Nirvinna Sarva Karmasu. And apart from these 9 limbs, he does not think that, oh, I should do some karma, some jnana, some yoga, and all of that. Only then my bhakti will become successful. He does not have such an understanding. Third, Veda dukkhatmakam kaman. He understands that engagement in sense gratification eventually leads to suffering. He has that faith. But still, parityage api anishwara. He is not always able to say no to sense gratification. And jushamanascha tan kaman dukkho darkamscha garhayan. And whenever he succumbs to such sense gratification, he feels repentant. I should not have let down my Guru. I should not have let down Krishna. They'll be displeased that I let them down. Krishna says, good, repentance is good, but don't let that repentance degrade itself into depression. That will debilitate you from performing devotional service. So he says, Tato bhajeta mam prita, be happy. Don't be so despondent. You enthusiastically practice bhakti, and slowly these material desires will go away. So this is an elaborate discussion on the nature of a Vaidhi sadhaka. So now we have seen three sets of definitions. First definition was the definition of pure devotional service. Second was the definition of mixed devotional service. And the third is the definition of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, regulated devotional service. So of these three definitions, which one best fits your own practice? Whenever I ask this question, generally people say the third definition. The third definition best fits my practice. But interestingly, if you see, the first definition is inclusive in the third definition. So Vaidhi sadhana bhakti means Vaidhi sadhana uttama bhakti. That is how Srila Rupa Goswami mentions. He says this definition of uttama bhakti, or this verse defining uttama bhakti, he says this is the Paribhasha Sutra of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. What is this Paribhasha Sutra? He says any subsequent definition that you see in this book must include this definition, which means after defining uttama bhakti, Srila Rupa Goswami defines sadhana bhakti. So Rupa Goswami says sadhana bhakti means sadhana uttama bhakti. Then he defines Vaidhi sadhana bhakti. Rupa Goswami says Vaidhi sadhana bhakti means it should have the element of Vaidhi, it should have the element of sadhana, and bhakti means uttama bhakti. Which means even when the sadhaka is struggling to control his sense gratificatory desires, he is troubled by lust, anger, envy, greed, illusion and pride. Nevertheless, his practice of bhakti is considered uttama, pure. So now we will have to try to understand how this is true. How can it be true? How can one practice pure devotional service despite being troubled by lust, anger, envy, greed, illusion and pride? This is a very relevant question. So therefore most people end up thinking that actually I am practicing mixed devotional service. I can never practice pure devotional service. If you go back for a moment to this definition of mixed devotional service that we saw, I want you to concentrate on this word abhisandaya or uddishya. So abhisandaya or uddishya means uddesh means goal. Abhisandaya also means goal. So a person who is tamasic, he has violent goals. He does not consider violence as an obstacle in his practice, but he actually aspires for some violent end. Maybe he will desire that his enemy dies. His enemy has, he may pray to Krishna that his enemy suffers a severe loss in his business during this coronavirus time. Let COVID destroy. Krishna, please use this COVID time to bring severe loss of business. So he may actively pray in that way. Similarly, a Rajasic person may pray, Krishna, please make me very famous. And a Sattvic person may say, Krishna, please remove all the miseries. Let me have a happy experience practicing bhakti. This is how he will pray. While devotees may also succumb to this desire for violent desires, or desire for fame, desire for pride, desire instigated by pride, or desire for overcoming material miseries. But a devotee, a sincere devotee, while he may endeavor to fulfill those desires, but when it comes to offering his prayers to Krishna, he prays for the removal of these desires and he does not pray to Krishna to fulfill those desires. If one actually prays, Krishna, please remove my misery, I want to be happy, rather than Krishna, why am I so absorbed in my own happiness? Can you please remove this desire? Let me start aspiring for pleasing my Guru. Let me start aspiring for pleasing you. That is the prayer of a devotee, pure devotee, a practicing pure devotee. He may be troubled by lust, but he will see lust as an obstacle rather than lust as the goal. He may be troubled by anger. He will see anger as an obstacle rather than anger as the goal. He may not be very comfortable with the suffering the threefold miseries, but a desire, and he may eventually try to overcome it also, but he will not actively pray for it. That is not his goal. His goal is to please Krishna. That goal is clear. So therefore, we will try to understand this concept of desires. So desires, what you see in this slide right now, desires are of two types based on where they come from. What is the source of these desires? There are two prominent impetus which creates desires. One is called value system. Another is called conditioning. Both the value system and conditioning creates desires. So, value system means that which says this is right, you should do it, this is wrong, you should not do it. This is value system. So, one may get some desires which are born out of one's value system also. Or on the other hand, someone may get a desire which is inspired by their conditioning. What does conditioning say? Hey, you like it. So go and eat it. Or you don't like it. Stay away from it. So the conditioning works on the platform of likes and dislikes, whereas the value system works on the platform of right and wrong. So when a person tries to perform an activity, these are the two prominent stimuli that he has. I will do it because it is right, or sometimes I will do it because I like it. So these two are actually real stimulus that a devotee has in his life. So the value system is called as Shraddha. Shra means heart, Dha means to give. So Shraddha means that which inspires a person to give his heart to something. That is Shraddha. And the conditioning is called as Swabhava. And this conditioning is made of various impressions of sense gratification, which are called as vasanas. So these vasanas impel a person to act in a particular way, and sometimes the value system can impel a person to act in a particular way. So generally, desires which are born out of one's value system, they are called as abhilasha. And desires which are born out of one's conditioning are called as anartha. And generally, there is a very strong tug of war between these two. Like for example, we will see few examples here. Like the desire to please the spiritual master. Any practicing sadhaka definitely has this desire to please the spiritual master. But if you see, this desire is born out of one's value system. Because the value system says if you want to progress in devotional service, it is impossible without pleasing the spiritual master. Yasya deve para bhaktir yatha deve tata gurau tasyeva katita hi artah prakashante mahatmanah. Unless one has the same kind of devotion that one has for Krishna towards the Guru, one cannot progress. That's what the Bhakti Shastras say. Adau Guru Padashraya. Bhakti Rasam Sindhu itself says the first limb of bhakti is to surrender to a Guru. Vishrambena Guror Seva, to serve the Guru with lot of affection. And in this way, any Bhakti Shastra glorifies that if you want to progress on the path of Bhakti, you have to please the spiritual master. So similarly, any practicing sadhaka possesses this desire of, I would like to please my spiritual master. And this desire is born out of one's value system. But at the same time, the same sadhaka may be troubled by the desire for opposite sex. He may get agitated when he sees the form of opposite sex. Not that suddenly he has lost his desire for pleasing the Guru, but both may simultaneously exist. But this desire for opposite sex is born from his vasanas, his swabhava, his conditioning. He has had past experiences of enjoying with the opposite sex, and those memories come and haunt back every time and again. But this is an anartha. The devotee sees this as an anartha. And when he goes in front of the deities, Radha and Krishna, he prays, "Oh Krishna, I am troubled by these lusty desires. Why don't you please help me overcome these desires?" rather than praying for the fulfillment of these desires. So Abhilasha means those desires for which we pray for their fulfillment. And Anartha means those desires which we pray to be removed. But the fact is, both may simultaneously exist within the heart of a practicing sadhaka. And desire to chant quality rounds, which sincere sadhaka does not have this desire. He has. But at the same time, desire to slap that idiot, anger, that also haunts the sadhaka every now and then, and he may succumb to that desire also. But the desire to chant his quality rounds, he will pray for the fulfillment of that desire, but the impetus of anger, he will pray for removal of that desire. So if one is praying for the removal of a particular desire, identifying it as an obstacle in one's progress in devotional service, then one should see that kind of desire as an anartha. And if one is praying for the fulfillment of a particular cherished goal, then such kind of desires are called as abhilasha. Now, those of you who raised your hands for, or those of you who did not raise your hands, telling that, Prabhu, I don't practice, my practice does not fit this definition of Anyabhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karma Dhyanavrutam Anukulyena Krishnanushīlanam. It does not fit that definition. Why? Because I have lot of other desires. Now, based on this discussion of Shraddha and Swabhava that we have discussed, or value system and conditioning, or Abhilasha and Anartha. So these dichotomy which exists within a practicing sadhaka, now with this understanding, I would like you to do a small exercise. Take a few seconds to introspect and identify the desires that you have in your heart, and I will give you 2 bins for segregating these 2 types of desires. Identify your abhilashas and put it in the abhilasha bin. And identify your anarthas and put it in your anartha bin. So after you do this, what I am requesting you is, all of you kindly give me your anartha bin and keep the abhilasha bin close to your heart. Don't let it go. So now, at least theoretically, try to imagine that you are left with your abhilasha and not your anartha. Now I want you to look at the kind of desires that are there in your abhilasha bin and kindly tell me, now, is your practice of bhakti Anyabhilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karmadhyanavritam, Anukulyena Krishnanashilanam. Generally, most people say yes, because this exercise is very vital. Generally, we feel that my practice of bhakti is not pure because we generally do not try to differentiate between abhilasha and anartha. We tend to put them in the same bin. So when you look into the bin, you see lot of unwanted desires. But if you segregate them nicely, then you will realize that actually my practice is anyabhilashita shunyam, but it may not be necessarily anya anartha shunyam. It may not be free of anarthas, but it is free of anya abhilasha. My cherished desire is still to please my spiritual master. My cherished desire is still to please Krishna. My cherished desire is still to chant quality rounds. But in trying to achieve these goals, I am plagued by lust, anger, envy, greed, illusion, pride, which I have put in the anartha bin. So interestingly, Rupa Goswami defines Uttama Bhakti as Anya Abhilashita Shunyam and not Anya Anartha Shunyam. Rather, in the very next section that we will be seeing after this section is the 6 benefits of Bhakti. The 6 benefits of Uttama Bhakti. A practitioner of Uttama Bhakti, what he stands to gain. So the first thing that Srila Rupa Goswami says is Kleshagni. Kleshagni means destruction of miseries. So he defines miseries. What is misery? Misery means, he says, karma, karmic reactions. Like you may meet with an accident, or you may have an ugly body, or your intelligence may not be very well developed. All this is all prarabdha karma. One kind of suffering. Another kind of suffering is what you would experience in your future lifetimes. That is aprarabdha karma. But apart from that, you also have sinful desires which inspire you to perform sinful activities, for which you may get the reactions. And then you have sinful vasanas, sinful impressions of past experience of sinful activities. That is also there. So, Srila Rupa Goswami says, practice of bhakti destroys those sinful impressions also, and then sinful desires also. So now, how can, if you take those sinful desires to be actually abhilasha, then how can a practitioner of anyabhilashita shunya bhakti have sinful desires? Because by definition his practice is anyabhilashita shunyam. He has no other desire other than the desire to please Krishna. So if he has no other desire other than the desire to please Krishna, then where did all this sinful desire come from? So the point is, you can reconcile this only if you understand that these desires are of 2 types. One desire which is born out of conditioning, which are called as anarthas, and other desires which are born out of one's value system, which are called as abhilasha. So Rupa Goswami says, you must not have as your goal of life anything other than pleasing Krishna, anything other than pleasing Guru, anything other than re-establishing your relationship with Krishna. But while nourishing that goal, while watering that goal, you may be troubled by some roadblocks in the form of lust, anger, envy, greed. That is okay. Your practice of anyabhilashita shunya bhakti will take care of those anarthas. So this is what Srila Rupa Goswami is explaining. Otherwise you will never be able to reconcile how does bhakti destroy sinful desires at the same time remaining uttama bhakti, anyabhilashita shunyam. Why not? Because what is mentioned here as sinful desire is an anartha, but the abhilasha can be pure. So, therefore, one should understand the difference between Vaidhi sadhana bhakti and mixed devotional service. Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, at least in the early stages, till one reaches the stage of Nishtha Ruchi, is defined as performing devotional service with material desires in the form of anarthas. This is Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, at least before Nishtha Ruchi. But mixed devotional service is performing devotional service for fulfilling one's material desires, which means he is actively praying for the fulfillment of those desires, which means his goal is different. His goal is not to please Krishna. His goal is mukti. His goal is not to please Krishna. His goal is to go to Swarga and enjoy. His goal is not to please Krishna. His goal is to attain some siddhis. Bhukti mukti siddhi kami sakale ashanta. Krishna bhakta nishkama atayeva shanta. So, these bhukti kamis, mukti kamis, siddhi kamis have as their goal bhukti, mukti and siddhi. Whereas a Vaidhi sadhaka, while having his goal as Krishna prem, while having his goal as pleasing Krishna, he may be troubled by some roadblocks in the form of bhukti, bhukti and siddhi. So from an external point of view, if you look at the activities of a mixed devotee and a struggling Vaidhi sadhaka, they will look the same. But they are not same, because one is acting, the mixed devotee is acting on these desires in the form of abhilasha, whereas a Vaidhi sadhaka is acting on these desires in the form of anarthas. But anartha nivritti is guaranteed for a sincere practitioner of bhakti. So therefore, one may say, look, this concept looks very attractive, but what is the proof? What is the proof for this concept? Abhilasha, anartha, shraddha, swabhav, value system, conditioning. Is there any proof for this? Do Shastras talk about this in this way? Or is this just a creation of your fertile imagination? What is the proof? Someone may ask. So we will try to explore some verses from Bhagavad Gita and from Bhagavatam to try to understand, is this concept discussed in Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam or not? So, the first verse that I would quote is from Bhagavad Gita 3rd chapter, where Krishna says, Sadrisham cheshtate swasya prakriter jnanavanapi prakritim yanti bhutani nigraha kim karishyati. Krishna says, my dear Arjuna, jnanavanapi, even a knowledgeable man who knows the scriptures acts according to the push of his swabhava. Swasyaha prakriter sadrisham cheshtate. He performs activities being inspired by his prakriti, being inspired by his swabhava, being inspired by his conditioning. Prakritim yanti bhutani. Everyone helplessly acts according to their swabhava. Nigraha kim karishyati. What can repression accomplish? Or what can threat of punishment accomplish? Krishna says this to indicate about the powerful nature of one's vasanas, powerful nature of one's swabhava or conditioning. But is it all in all? Will everyone have to helplessly succumb to their lower nature? Is it true? In the very next verse, Krishna clarifies. Krishna says in 3.34 Bhagavad Gita, Indriyasya indriyasyarte ragadveshau vyavastitau tayor na vashamagachet tauhyasya paripantinau. Krishna says, in every sense object and in the sense, ragadveshau vyavastitau, likes and dislikes are present. As soon as one sees batata vada or some very delicious looking noodles or whatever it may be, one may start salivating spontaneously. And as soon as one may see bitter gourd or karela, immediately hatred, dvesha. So raga, dvesha. It's present in every sense object. But Krishna says, tayor na vashamagachet. But you can't afford to always act on the platform of likes and dislikes, O Arjuna. Why? Tauhyasya paripantino, because they will act as roadblocks to attain your goal. So what is Krishna telling here? Krishna is telling here that, look, Arjuna, I understand that you may like something and do not like something. But is this the only platform of acting? Don't the scriptures say that irrespective of what you may like or not like, there are certain things which are correct, which if you perform, you can attain your higher goal, even though you may not like it. Some people may not like to always sit and hear classes in YouTube, whereas watching a movie in YouTube might be very attractive. Class is boring, and that too, a philosophical class like this will definitely be boring. At least there must be some pastimes. But what can I do? That is the nature of this subject matter. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is a philosophical book. So one may not like it. So one may rather want to watch some movie on the same YouTube. That may be the liking. But so now he has two choices. Two pulls, two opposite pulls. The Shastras say this is not very favorable for your bhakti. Unfavorable. Pratikul for your bhakti. But the conditioning says, but I love it. And then the tug of war starts. So whichever is stronger pull, that will win the battle. As His Holiness Bhakti Tirth Swami Maharaj always says, there is a good dog and a bad dog. So the good dog is the dog of one's value system or Shraddha dog. And the bad dog is the Swabhava dog or the conditioning dog. So whichever we feed more, that dog will become more powerful. If by putting ourselves in the association of fired up, inspiring, loving, affectionate devotees who are always committed to acting on the platform of their value system, if we live in their association and get inspired, then we are feeding our Shraddha dog, our value system dog. But if we go alone, in the absence of that association, if we keep on succumbing to our lower nature while not taking active support of the association of Vaishnavas, then we are feeding the lower dog. So then the lower dog will bark ferociously. So therefore, Krishna says, look, you have your higher dog, Shraddha dog, which says that to act on the platform of raga and dvesh, likes and dislikes, is very inappropriate for your progress in bhakti. Why don't you give it up? Exercise your free will to act on the platform of your value system. Anukulyasya sankalpo, pratikulyasya varjanam. Accept whatever is favorable for bhakti and reject whatever is unfavorable for bhakti. So Srila Baldev Vidyabhushan commenting on this verse, he says, Vasanas or samskaras are means by which experiences of previous lives stay with the jiva life after life. So whatever we have done and appreciated in our previous lives also, we carry over. That is why you see some children, after taking birth, right from the birth, they have a very strong sense of music. Like you have Mozart or Beethoven, or even I have seen in many other cases some other contemporary people also, from a very, very young age, they have a very strong musical sense. They have very strong percussion sense, which is very rare for someone of that age. So these are some of the impressions that they may be carrying, very likely be carrying from their past lives also. So this is vasanas. So under certain conditions, these impressions activate, creating memory of previous like or dislike. So as soon as you look at a rasgulla, you start salivating. Why? Because you have had a past experience of enjoying it. I remember once I was sitting in our temple in Chowpatty, and right next to me, an African devotee was sitting. That was a day of feast and they were serving rasgulla for everyone. and I took one rasgulla, and the African devotee sitting next to me waved off because he didn't want to take. I became very curious, in fact little annoyed. How could you not take this rasgulla? So then I asked him, why didn't you take it? He said, I don't know what it is. I said, trust me, please take one. You will like it. So he was still not very convinced, but because maybe he didn't want to displease me, so he took one rasgulla. He ate it. I remember his expression the first time he took that bite. It was like some atom bomb exploded in his mouth. He couldn't believe that something could be so tasty. And then he was asking me, is there second serving? But unfortunately there was only one serving. So the point is, this is what one impression can create, such a strong impression. One vasana can create, one experience of enjoying a particular sense object can create such a strong impression. So even though vasanas are powerful to instigate a jiva to action, still they do not make the jiva powerless to make his own choice. We may salivate looking at a roadside golgappa, but that does not mean we have suddenly become powerless to resist that temptation. The free will of the devotee is there, and that comes from the value system. Free will of the jiva exists along with the vasana. So free will is the shraddha, vasana is the swabhava or conditioning. This enables the jiva to choose the advice of the scripture over the material desires. So in this way, when he constantly chooses to accept the advice of the scripture over the pull of the swabhava, then he makes his shraddha very stronger and stronger and stronger, and by starving the vasana becomes weaker and weaker and weaker, and slowly it vanishes. So this is one example. Another example in the same chapter, little later, 2 verses later, Arjuna says, Ata kena prayuktoyam papam charati purushah anichannapi varshneya baladiva niyojitah. Very famous verse. Arjuna is asking Krishna, O Krishna, what is this which is impelling me to commit sinful activities? Anichan, even though I don't want to do it, why am I being pushed helplessly to commit these activities? If you see Arjuna's choice of words in this verse, it indicates this dichotomy very clearly. First he says, papam. Papam indicates that he could have told karma, but he uses the word papam, indicating sinful, which means there is some value system which is indicating that, oh, this activity is sinful, don't do it. And therefore, he says, anichan, mujhe ichha nahi lagta hai. I don't feel like committing this act, performing this activity, but I am being pushed. So these two words, papam and anichan, indicates that he has a very strong value system which defines that these activities are inappropriate activities. But at the same time he says, I am pushed to act. Prayuktaha means I am pushed. Aham, I am pushed, papam chariti, to perform the sinful activities. Who is pushing? The vasana is pushing. So in this way, if you can see, Arjuna very beautifully brings out this dichotomy within the heart of a practicing sadhaka who has not successfully transcended the stage of anartha nivritti. Another famous example is again from Bhagavad Gita, the famous Chatushloki Bhagavad Gita. The 10th and 11th verses, the last two verses also bring out this dichotomy. So where Krishna says, Tesham satatayuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhiyogam tam yenamam upayantite. He says, dadami buddhiyogam, I give intelligence to whom? Tesham satata yuktanam. To whom? To those who constantly desire association with me. Satata yukti means constant association. And bhajatam priti purvakam, he worships me with lot of love and affection. To that person, I give him the intelligence by which he can attain me. So two characteristics. Satata yukti, a desire for constant association of Krishna, and in order to achieve that, bhajatam priti purvakam, worship with lot of love and affection. And then in the very next verse Krishna says, teshameva, to that very same person who desires constant association with me and who is worshipping me with lot of love and affection, he says anukampartam, having lot of compassion towards that person, aham agyanajam tamaha nashayami. He says, I destroy the darkness born out of ignorance within his heart through the shining lamplight of knowledge. Bhasvata jnana deepena aham agyanajam tamaha nashayami. By that shining lamplight of knowledge, I destroy the ignorance within his heart, Krishna says. Now the question is, that person desires nothing other than constant relationship with Krishna, and he performs loving devotional service to Krishna, then where did this agyanajam tamaha, this darkness born out of ignorance, come from? Is Krishna talking about two different people, or is he talking about the same person? So Krishna here is acknowledging that these anarthas can coexist in the heart of a person who aspires after Krishna Prem. So aspiration and roadblocks are two different things. So Srila Baldev Vidyabhushan, commenting on this verse, he says, I would like you to concentrate on the second point where Krishna says, for those who cannot maintain their lives without me, for my unalloyed devotees alone. So he is talking about very advanced devotees. They cannot maintain their lives without Krishna, and they are unalloyed devotees. Unalloyed means they have no other desire. And Krishna says, what do I do to them? I reveal in the Atma my dazzling form and qualities and destroy the darkness in the form of desires for objects other than myself. So now, here is a very clear contradiction that Krishna is presenting. On one hand, he says, they are unalloyed devotees, they cannot maintain their lives without Krishna. But on the other hand, he says, I will destroy lurking within their hearts those desires for objects other than myself, he says. So now the question is, how is he an unalloyed devotee if he has desires for objects other than Krishna within his heart? How is he a devotee who cannot maintain his life without Krishna if he parallelly has desires for material sense enjoyment within his heart? Is this possible or not possible? Possible. Abhilasha is to please Krishna. Anartha is for Golgappa. Anartha is for opposite sex. Anartha is for accumulating more and more wealth. Anartha is for fame. Anartha is for duplicity. These are all roadblocks. But at the same time, one may have his goal very clear. That is what Krishna is indicating here through these two verses. He says, Agyanajam Tamaha is there and Satata Yukti is also there. Agyanajam Tamaha is there, Bhajatam Priti Purvakam is also there. These can coexist. Another very classic verse from Bhagavad Gita. Till now we have been seeing only verses from Bhagavad Gita. This is a very classic verse where this dichotomy is brought out in such a graphic way by Krishna. He says, Apichet suduracharo bhajate mam ananyabhak sadureva samantavya samyak vyavasito hi saha. He says, Apichet suduracharo. Even if the most sinful person, mam bhajate, worships me, and ananya bhak, with no other desire other than the desire to please me. This is the meaning of ananya bhak. Wait a minute, didn't you just say that he is sudurachari, most sinful? Can a most sinful person have no other desire other than the desire to please Krishna? Is it possible practically? Or is Krishna talking about two different people? So, he says, Bhajate mam ananya bhak sadhureva samantavya. Krishna says you should consider him as a sadhu. Samyak vyavasito hi saha. Because he is fixed himself completely in me while possessing those sinful desires. Now, how do you understand this? How will you reconcile this contradiction? Srila Vishwanath Thakur and Srila Prabhupada very beautifully explain this concept. So, Srila Vishwanath Thakur explains about the devotee. He says, my attachment to my devotee is my very nature. Krishna says, that attachment does not decrease even if the devotee commits wrong. Then what will you do? Krishna says, I will make him come up to the standard. It is my responsibility. Why do you worry? He has surrendered unto me. I will take care of him. And he says, Sudurachari. Who is a Sudurachari? He says, someone who is committed to violence, someone who is addicted to violence, someone who is addicted to thievery, someone who is addicted to adultery. He says, this is like Jagai Madai actually. And he says, worships me, but he should worship me. And then worship no one except me. He should not worship anyone else. And then he should not follow any other process like karma, jnana or yoga. Acha. And he should have no other desire other than the desire for attaining me. So this is what Krishna says. So if then he is my devotee. Sadhureva samantavya. So we don't have to look elsewhere. Don't search for Jagai and Madai. Search in our own heart. Do we have a desire to please Krishna? Yes. Do we cherish a higher goal than establishing a relationship with Krishna? No. We don't have any other goal which we cherish more than that. But at the same time, are we not troubled by lust? Are we not troubled by anger? Are we not troubled by greed? Krishna is exactly talking about us here. Apichet suduracharo bhajate mam ananyabhak sadhureva samantavya. But one may say, but considering his bad conduct, how is he a devotee? Krishna says, he is to be respected as a devotee because of his devotee qualities. What is his devotee qualities? Bhajate mam ananyabhak samyak vyavasito hi saha. These are his devotee qualities. So you see that. Don't see his sudurachari nature. Krishna says, it is my command. If you do not follow this command, it is an offense. I can accept durachar. I cannot accept aparad. This is what Krishna says. So then he says, okay, I understand what you say, Krishna. So you think whenever he worships you, I should consider him as a devotee, and whenever he commits some durachar, he is a non-devotee. Correct? Krishna says, no. He should be considered as a devotee in all his parts. You should not see his bad qualities at all. And this is exactly what Srila Rupa Goswami also says in Nectar of Instruction. Drishtair, Swabhava Janitair, Vapushascha Doshair, Na Prakritatvam iha bhakta janasya pashyed. Gangam baso na kalu budbuda fena pankair, Brahmadravatvam apagacchati na neera dharmair. He says, actually one should not see swabhava janitair dosha, whatever fault due to his conditioning that one may have in the form of some idiosyncrasies or some attachment to material things, some attachment to family, some attachment to opposite sex, whatever he may have, when it is seen in a devotee, one should not even see it as material, he says. Na prakritatvam pashyet, iha bhakta janasya pashyet. Gangambaso na kalubudbuda fena pankaya. During the monsoon season, if you look at the waters of Ganga, they are foaming with bubbles and they are brown in color, mixed with mud and everything. But don't underestimate the purifying potency of Ganga. How much ever dirty it may look like, its purifying potency is not compromised. Similarly, how much ever conditioning a devotee may be suffering, if he is sincere, his ability to purify is not compromised. So you should not see their material qualities at all. And this is exactly what Prabhupada also says through two wonderful analogies, Prabhupada's own analogies. If you want to look at a devotee, he says, look at the switchboard. If the switch is off, even though the fan may be running, it is just a question of time before it will stop. So, if someone has taken up to bhakti, anartha nivritti has started. If anartha nivritti has started, if bhakti has started and anartha nivritti is going on, then eventually at some point all anarthas will be destroyed. So therefore, if you want to judge a devotee, don't look at the running fan, the moving blades, but look at the switch box and see if the switch is on or off. If it is off, don't bother, just be patient. And then the second example, that analogy that Prabhupada gives is, don't criticize a dirty person who is standing below the shower. If he is standing below the shower with soap in his hand, it is just a question of time before all that dirt will be washed away. So if a devotee, he is troubled by some conditioning, don't criticize him, because he has a process which is capable of purifying that conditioning. That's what he is telling here. He makes a splendid resolution, the devotee. I will go to hell for my sinful actions, which are hard to give up, but I will not give up dedicated worship of Krishna. Krishna says, the devotee says. So in this way, Srila Vishwanath Thakur explains about this apichet suduracharo. And of course, Prabhupada also gives a beautiful explanation, but we are running short of time. And Prabhupada explains that how, I will just brief Prabhupada's explanation of this. We will not go verse line by line. Prabhupada says there are two kinds of activities. One is conditioned activity and another is constitutional activity, Prabhupada says. Conditioned activity is swabhava and constitutional activity is bhakti. And Prabhupada said sometimes the constitutional activity and the conditioned activity may be anti-parallel. They may oppose each other. Like in the case of a devotee, sadhaka, struggling sadhaka. But in other cases, when they progress further, then the conditional activities and the constitutional activities may become parallel. This is the case of very advanced devotees. Like that Prabhupada explains. And Prabhupada says that, but such a temporary fall down does not disqualify him. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated that if a person falls down but is wholeheartedly engaged in the transcendental service of the Supreme Lord, the Lord being situated within his heart purifies him and excuses him from that abomination. Swapada moolam bhajata priyasya tyaktanya bhavasya hari pareshah vikarmayachot patitam katanchit dhunoti sarvam hridisannivishta. In the 11th canto it is mentioned. Vikarmayachot patitam katanchit. Somehow or other, if he falls trapped to some vikarma, the Lord present within the heart of that devotee destroys it. This is what Prabhupada is explaining in his purport. And then Krishna, in the very next verse, he says, क्षिप्रम भवति धर्मात्मा शश्वत शांतिम निगच्छति कौन्तेय प्रतिजाने ही नमे भक्त प्रणश्यति. You don't worry about that person. He will very quickly become a righteous person. Shashvat Shantim Nigachati, and will become completely free of his contamination. If I give this assurance, people may think that Krishna always breaks his vow. Krishna does not keep up his promise. They may not trust me, but they will trust you, Arjuna. You go and loudly proclaim that Name Bhakta Pranashyati, that my devotees shall never perish. You go and loudly proclaim this, Krishna says, that I will personally take care of my devotees' conditioning. I will ensure that he becomes a Dharmatma. This is my guarantee. One who takes up to the path of bhakti shall never perish. Neha vikramanashosti pratyavayo na vidyate. Swalpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Even in Bhagavad Gita, earlier chapters only, Krishna gives this guarantee. So we will just rush. I will skip some sections. Maybe when we get a chance later, we will still see more elaborately on the subject matter. But I think more or less the message has been conveyed. Another interesting point in the sixth canto begins in a very beautiful way. A very wonderful conversation happens between Parikshit Maharaj and Shukadeva Goswami. Towards the end of fifth canto, Shukadeva Goswami gives a description of the hellish planets. After hearing this, Parikshit Maharaj feels extreme compassion towards those who would eventually go to this hell and suffer. So, Parikshit Maharaj asked this question, how can they escape this hellish suffering? So, Shukadeva Goswami wanted to test Parikshit Maharaj. So, he says that by performing Karmakandiya Prayaschitta, perform Prayaschitta and you can overcome by atonements, the ritualistic atonements mentioned in the Karmakandiya section of the Vedas. But because Parikshit Maharaj had very attentively heard the first 5 cantos, he could immediately identify this contradictory instruction and he immediately rejects it. He says, Drishta Shrutabhyam Yat Papam Janan Api Atmano Ahitam Karoti Bhuyo Vivashah Prayaschitta Matokatam. He says that even though this Karmakandi knows that this activity is sinful, and if I perform this, I will have to suffer the reactions. But still, and he may perform, after having committed that offense, having committed that sinful activity, he may have performed some prayaschitta also. But still you see that after some time he ends up performing that same sinful activity. Kvachin nivartate abhadrat kvachit charati tat punah. Prayaschittam ato apartam manye kunjara shauchavat. He says, such a person I have seen, my dear Shukadeva Goswami, sometimes he refrains from performing that sinful activity, thinking, hey, it's sinful, this is sinful. And at other times, he ends up performing the same sinful activity. Prayaschittam ato apartam. Therefore, I consider such a kind of prayaschitta to be useless. Manye kunjara shauchavat. It is like an elephant taking bath. An elephant goes and swims in the water and takes a bath, and after coming out, takes some mud and sprinkles over it. So nullifying all the good effect of taking bath. But doesn't Parikshit Maharaj know from his own experience and by his own experience of seeing other sadhakas that this tendency is there in sadhakas also? Kvachin nivartate abhadrad, kvachit charati tat punah. Sometimes they refrain from performing some abominable activity because they know that it is wrong, it is not recommended in the scriptures, and at other times, overcome by intense urge for enjoyment, they end up doing those very same sinful activities. This is seen, this kind of durachari activity is seen in devotees also. Why is Parikshit, and when Shukadeva Goswami says, Kechit kevalaya bhaktya vasudeva parayana agham dunvanti katsnena niharam eva bhaskaraha. Correct, my dear Parikshit Maharaj, I gave you all the wrong choices. First I told you Karma Kanda, then I told you Jnana Kanda, but Sakale Vishayera Banda. Everything is useless. Actually, the only process that can rectify this situation, that can save one from going to hell, is actually Kevala Bhakti, Uttama Bhakti. But Parikshit Maharaj knows that even practitioners of Uttama Bhakti struggle with this problem. Kvachin nivartate abhadrat, kvachit charati tat punah. Sometimes they refrain and sometimes they end up indulging in those very same activity. So why is he not? But there is no account of Parikshit Maharaj raising an objection. Arey, you are talking about bhakti, but I have seen the devotees also struggling with the same problem. So in one of the explanations, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions that from this statement, the following should also be understood. If a devotee practicing pure bhakti happens to commit sin again, it is like the bite of a snake without fangs, or it is like the rotation of a fan with the switch off. Those sins have no significant effect as long as he is samyak vyavasito hi saha. He has genuine repentance and he repents falling trapped to that sinful activity. That condition should not be compared to the elephant taking bath, the karmi who again commits the sin. That's what he says. And then in this he quotes, Apichet suduracharo bhajate mamananyabhak sadureva samantavya samyak vyavasito hi saha. Like that. So, and again another very interesting verse that comes in the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Vidura tells Maitreya, he says, my dear Maitreya, there are two kinds of people who are happy in this material world. Yascha modatama loke, yascha buddhehe paramgataha, tavu bhav sukhamedete klishyati antarito jana. He says, two kinds of people are happy. One is mudatama loke, the completely materialistic person. He is very happy. Why? Because he has no value system which says this is wrong. So for him, whatever he likes, that is good. Whatever he does not like, that is bad. So therefore there is no guilt. And then, yascha buddhehe paramgataha, those who have attained the Lord's lotus feet, the pure devotees, they are also happy. Why? What they like is what is good. What they like is what is favorable. They like the Lord's lotus feet, and the Lord's lotus feet is the most auspicious thing. They don't like material enjoyment, and material enjoyment is not at all recommended. So therefore again there is no guilt. But he says, Klishyati antarito jana. But these in-between people are suffering. Who are these in-between people? All of us, Vaidhi sadhakas. Our Shraddha, our faith, our value system is paramgataha, there. But our swabhava is mudatama loke, material. And therefore this tug of war goes on. And this leads to klesha. That's what he says, Klishyati antarito jana. The in-between people are the ones who suffer. And what you see in the slide right now is from the book Shuddha Bhakti Chintamani by Srila Shivaram Swami Maharaj. In that he writes a very beautiful passage. And this is from the 26th chapter, which talks about unsteady worship of the name. He says, however, very powerful sentences, please carefully listen. However, devotees who try their best to perfect their sadhana and to serve the mission. So their desire is to perfect the sadhana, to serve the mission, but who are handicapped by their own conditioned nature, can legitimately expect Krishna's kindness. They can legitimately expect Krishna's kindness. Soft-hearted Krishna is sympathetic to the plight of his devotees in Kali Yuga. He knows. that it is difficult, they are struggling, they are trying their best to fight the weapons of mass distraction. Therefore, it softens his heart. Thus, if for reasons other than neglecting the process, they cannot complete their Krishna consciousness, they will receive Lord Chaitanya's gift of love. And Srila Prabhupada's promise of deliverance will certainly be fulfilled. Therefore, devotees must practice the limbs of devotional service, such as controlling the mind, studying the books, perfecting their japa, and remembering Krishna. They should endeavor with full sincerity and have full trust in the process that yes, if I try my best without doubting the process, these anarthas will one day go away. That trust he should have. And also, in his book Madhurya Kadambini, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti explains that the nullification of these anarthas or unwanted desires like lust, anger, envy, greed, illusion, etc. is gradual. He says, Ekadeshavartini, Bahudeshavartini, Prayiki, Purna, Atyantika. He says in 5 stages these anarthas are gone. It starts with bhajana kriya. As soon as we start chanting, slowly Chetodarpana Marjanam starts. But it's not that the very next day we become completely free of anarthas. He says, till bhava, this stage continues. First, Ekadesha Vartini, 1 or 2 anarthas are destroyed. Then Bahudesha Vartini, when we progress little further, many anarthas they start getting destroyed. Then we progress still further, Prayiki, almost all anarthas get destroyed. Then we progress still further, it reaches the stage of Purna, completely destroyed. Then we progress still further, it becomes Atyantiki. Atyantiki means destroyed to such an extent that it cannot come and trouble us back again. So therefore, even the acharyas do not promise immediate destruction of anarthas. It is gradual. So, and also Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his book Jaiva Dharma, he describes this concept of Shraddha and Swabhava very beautifully. So, we will discuss this section tomorrow, but before that, because this will be like a proof of whatever we have discussed, because I have given you some examples from various sections of Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam which brings out this theme, but in Bhaktivinoda Thakur in this Jaiva Dharma actually uses the very same terminologies of Shraddha and Swabhava to explain this concept by quoting the exact same verses that we saw. So when I first read this Jaiva Dharma, it was like ecstasy for me, because people were always asking me, what is the proof? Where is the proof? Where is the proof? Where exactly are these terminologies used, and explained it in the same way. Even though the concept was clear, but then to understand, when I saw the exact same concept explained in using the exact same terminologies by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, it gave me a lot of strength. So we will see this example tomorrow, but continue this discussion tomorrow. Of course, I am sorry I could not complete this theme completely. I am splitting it into 2. So tomorrow in the first half we will definitely continue discussing this theme further. Very important theme for practicing sadhakas, to understand, to learn to differentiate these 2 types of desires in order to stay enthusiastic in their practice of devotional service and not get bogged down thinking that pure devotional service is not for me. I will only settle down for mixed devotional service. One should not feel like that. And this can happen potentially if we are not properly educated. That's why Rupa Goswami is trying to educate us here. So we will thank you very much for your patient listening. I hope something was clear through this discussion that we had today. And if you have some comments, questions which you need further clarification, please do type in your chat box, and I will try my best to answer these questions in tomorrow's session. So again, I want to thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for patiently listening, because in this digital age, 1.5 hours lecture is practically very difficult. This is the age of 2-minute clips, 1-minute clip. So therefore, 1.5 hours lecture, if you have heard, you are one of the rarest souls on planet Earth right now. So therefore, I really congratulate you for listening, and thank you very much. Hopefully, we'll meet tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Rupa Goswami Pad ki jai. Hare Krishna.